Hey there, it's Tess and Christina. We're the co-hosts of Authentically Wild, a podcast that's here to shake up how you see life, relationships, and your healing journey.
This isn't your typical feel-good chatter. We're diving headfirst into the raw, real, and transformative conversations that can change everything you thought you knew about yourself and the life you're currently living.
We're pulling back the curtain on our day-to-day lives, talking about relationships, parenthood, personal growth, trauma, and spirituality. Both of us have transitioned from lives that felt stuck and inauthentic to discovering a way of living that's raw, honest, and deeply healing.
The breakthroughs that we've had, they've been wild, and they're exactly why this podcast exists. We knew we couldn't keep these conversations to ourselves.
So if you felt lost, stuck, or like there's something more out there for you, this is your sign.
It's in the hardest, messiest seasons of life that we discover our truest selves. But here's the thing, the choice to dig in, that's all yours, baby.
So buckle up.
Because shit's about to get wild.
Hey girl.
We're back.
You're hilarious. Hi everyone. Thanks for listening.
Welcome. I'm excited.
Me too.
I feel like I say that every week.
It's the newest highlight of our lives. Hopefully
really
it's also yours. Today's topic is on accepting other people's journeys. Ooh.
You know, I don't know if we ever really get this one, but we're gonna dive into all the things that have helped us because, you know, we were just talking about this, but I think that this is potentially one of the hardest parts about the awakening journey, aside from all your own stuff that you have to move through.
Well, I mean, I'm a firm believer that in relationship is where we are taught our biggest lessons. So, of course, this would be a topic that's super hard, right, for people to navigate and one that really continuously comes up.
Well, and I think the invitation here with this specific piece is to release more and more and more control. And that's exactly what the ego doesn't want to do. So, of course, there's going to be resistance. Of course, it's going to be scary. And yeah, this is something I talk to a lot about with people because, and I think it can also be a piece that sometimes can block us or prevent us from really expanding more into certain pieces on our journey because there can be a fear there of what is being asked of us to release, to let go of.
Yeah. It's so interesting because even with clients in breath work, so many people think it's fear of stepping into something, but so often our blocks are actually like delayering, de-armoring, letting something go, releasing something, because so often that becomes part of our identity, right? And it's interesting. I know we're going to jump into like why this is hard for us to accept in other people and all of those pieces. When I really think of my journey, I actually never used to have a hard time accepting other people's journeys. It was actually more accepting that I had choice in my own. Like for so long, those who've listened to earlier episodes, like I went so many decades of my life just sort of following this script. This is what I was told I should do, you know, or even I remember like trying to pick out what I wanted to major in college and listening to the influences around me, teachers. You'd be good at this, you should do that. And that's literally what I did. Like I never stopped to think, what do I want? What does my journey look like? It was very much like stay the course, stay the beaten track, and everything's going to work out.
And do you feel like because that's what you were so programmed to believe and just conditioned to live in, that was one of the pieces that made it harder to be able to kind of let go or trust with some of these relationships, the unfolding?
100%, because then as you begin to sort of start your own journey and your own path, there's a lot of loss that happens, right? And I think we'll get into that later as well, but I think it's a real test to see, is this truly what you want? Like, are you going to be able to go the distance on this path? Because the best petri dish for that is, I think, those conflicts, that fear that can come up in those relationships that, you know, like family, really close friends that are going to be those mirrors to you. And if you can handle that, then you're going to be fine in sort of the outside world, if you will, right?
Yeah. And I think that that's such a key piece to bring up. And, you know, in saying that, We have done an episode on grief. Really listen to that piece, because grief is such, at least in my opinion, kind of an unknown emotion that we're only learning really how to work through and process. It's definitely not one I was ever taught how to process. And it can be kind of sneaky in how it shows up. And so if you're listening to this and you're noticing a lot of resistance, especially in regards to letting go or trusting, releasing some of these relationships, see if there's some grief there. And if there is, go back and listen to our episode, because we give some key pieces on how to move through that grief.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into it. What do we even mean by this topic about, everyone is on their own journey? And so like, what's our understanding of that?
Yeah. So, and just to kind of give you an idea, if you're listening, wondering what we're kind of going to cover in this, we're going to look at what does it mean to be on your own journey and accepting other people's journey. We're going to bring in some different perspectives, some spiritual perspectives that could help you with this piece. Why is it hard for us to accept it? Of course, we're going to talk about our personal experiences. And then the last piece we'll end with is just some different pieces you can take with you on your own path to help you with the acceptance piece. So yeah, let's dive in here. One thing that I have learned on my own journey, I personally don't know if I've ever fully been able to hold this piece, is that everybody has their own journey. And being able to accept that truth, I'm telling you right now, is going to lessen so much suffering on your own journey, inner suffering, like suffering we create from the mind. Something that I have learned along the way, especially as I've dove more into my spiritual connection and trust and faith of the journey and my work that I do on the Akashic Records, is this piece around karmic lessons and soul contracts. And I'm going to say right now that this has been such a big piece for me, being able to find greater trust in not just the things that I am going through on my own journey, but also the things that I see others going through, including my kids. Because what I have come to learn is that our souls come here in this lifetime and all other soul experiences that our souls have, choosing very specific journeys, which entail specific lessons in order to grow and expand more and more into our highest selves, our highest energy and potential. And we learn these lessons within our contracts with other souls. You could really think of soul contracts as relationships that you have with other people in your life. And one way you could think of this is your souls, so let's say Tess and I, our individual souls will decide together to have this contract, which entails certain lessons, themes, experiences, challenges together that we are going to experience in this lifetime to help each other. Even if those don't feel like they're helpful challenges, on a deeper level, our souls know that there's something bigger going on here. And there can be differences in our contracts. So whereas you might have a really big soul contract with your parents, a child, a best friend, a sibling, a partner, you might have smaller soul contracts with maybe somebody you know throughout your life for a few months, or somebody who pops in to teach you maybe one small lesson. And I've really tried to also remind myself that there can be a difference, not so much of like small and big, but deeper. So often our deeper soul contracts will be with the people that we have so much more experiences, challenges, and karma to move through together.
Right. You bring up this really great way of looking at things too, because, depending on your belief system, if you believe that we're all souls in a human body and having this human experience, right, then Earth, this human experience really becomes this school of expansion. Whereas I think if you don't have some sort of belief, and again, it could be a variation of that, really, then it seems like these hard, really challenging pieces are kind of just happening to us on this big rock floating in the solar system. And we're like, you can't make sense of it. In my experience, and there's no judgment to anyone listening that maybe doesn't believe that, because I didn't for the first 30 years of my life either. But it has helped me, I guess, have empathy and understanding for my journey, for the experience that maybe myself or the people I love have had to go through. There's all these quotes and metaphors, the silver lining, the sun always comes, or the rainbow always comes after the rain, right? Like, we know this to be true. So there has to be this contraction in order for there to be this expansion and this growth, right? And so we can look at that too when it comes to our journey being contrasted with someone else that we're in relationship with, and the growth and the sort of tension that that creates for us. It's just another lesson we're learning. Radical acceptance, maybe.
And I love that you brought this piece up, because this is, the truth of it. You can believe whatever you want. I'm not here trying to get you to believe anything, but here's why I love this so much, is because for me on my journey, and you could have looked at me 15 years ago, I'm not the same person that I was then. I mean, I'm more myself, but I was the person, the skeptic, the person who, I guess you could say, atheist, so to speak. And through this journey, through being able to move through and transmute my own challenges and be able to go deeper with my spirituality, what these understandings have brought me is faith through these really hard pieces. And so no matter what you believe, the best part about this is that it gives you something to hold on to when the stuff is so freaking hard.
Yeah, I love that. Well, exactly, right? And faith looks so different for so many people. You could be religious, believe in God. You could have this spiritual practice where you believe in this higher energy, right? But I think at the sort of the crux and the foundation of all of those things is faith. Faith believing in something you can't see. It's a knowing. And if that makes us out to lunch in some way, like it's helped me through my journey. I honestly don't know what I would have done, right, in some of these rock bottom pieces. So I love that you brought that up.
It's funny you say like the out to lunch piece. Like, you want to go out to lunch, come to my page, come check out my stuff. I'll take you out to lunch. So good. Okay, so while we're talking about this, there have been two sort of interesting perspectives that I've actually landed on in the last few months around being able to accept more around another's journey, and I want to share them with you. One of these is a book that I'm reading right now, and it's called Between Death and Life, Dolores Cannon. If you don't know, go check out her work. She's got so many books. And what's so cool about the work that she does is she did work with her own clients. I think it was something like 40 years and like just thousands of sessions of hypnosis with her clients. And she stumbled upon this process, which it then became her own. She crafted it, and it's something that she's taught others how to do. It's like renowned. And what she stumbled upon was her clients began to, in these hypnosis sessions, start explaining these other experiences they were having that were not in this life. So she would go into the hypnosis experience wanting to help them understand more maybe about this life, childhood, deeper things that were in the subconscious. And what began to happen was that her clients in these sessions began actually talking about experiences that their soul was having, not in this lifetime, not in this body. And so this passage I'm going to read from her book talks a little bit around what one of the clients or many began to recollect as a resting life. And here's what it is. And this is around souls who choose to have resting lives. Some were resting lives and mean nothing to anyone else except this entity. A resting life can be long or short. It is one where the entity appears to coast through a dull, seemingly meaningless life where nothing really extraordinary happens. They seem to skate through life with nothing bothering them, without creating new karma. This may also help us to understand people in our own experiences who are living this type of life now. And so I share that because we probably know people who are having resting lives or who might have chosen resting lives. And when I read that, I was like, okay, it gives me a little bit of space between what I project is right or wrong about someone's journey and, oh no, actually it's exactly what is supposed to be happening for that person.
We always want to assume, and I'm guilty of this for sure, that we know what's best for someone. We have no idea. We have no idea. You know, I think even if someone is on a growth journey, let's just say, right, and you can see maybe this crossroads they're about to come to, or this mistake, maybe they're in some like awful tragic relationship and you're like, red flags, can't you see them? people have to be burned by the frickin' fire. So let them. Like, it doesn't matter if you can say, hey, like, no, don't do that. Go over here and do. The lesson is not learned. It's a felt experience. I'm not saying that we don't give advice. Obviously, we're always going to do that. But people need to go on their own journey. And if they're meant to awaken, if they're meant to be enlightened, if they're meant to, grow this huge career or this huge amount of success or whatever it might be, like, that's going to happen for them. But it's just on their own timeline, in their own way. But we always want to try and interject and change and form that in some way, right?
Well, and I think being able to recognize in that moment, that's your ego. That is the ego projecting, or sometimes the ego can get a bad rap, but at the base of that, at the root of that, is wanting to control to feel safer, or wanting to control to try to make sense of like the uncertainty of what's going on for others. And this is actually really cool because it reminds me of, I've done some sessions in the records, not some, but more recently, some of the sessions I have done where this piece has come up of that another person is accumulating data or accumulating experiences in this lifetime for greater expansion in others. And what does that mean? So I was doing a session for a woman and we were talking about her and her partner, and what came through as part of their soul contract is that her partner is actually not supposed to awaken in this life. I mean, maybe that's going to happen later, but it's definitely not supposed to happen right now. And what he is doing right now is accumulating experiences. His soul is taking in data so that he can actually, in another lifetime or later on the journey, be able to make greater shifts. And that actually made me think, like, we think we know the timeline. We think we know exactly when things are supposed to happen, but we really don't.
No, we don't. And it makes me think of you explaining that a lot of, a young soul versus an old soul. And I think there's different journeys. Like, when you meet someone, you're like, wow, you have all this wisdom, but you're, 31 or something. There's something to say about that too, right? We know different people in our lives that you can just tell they're young at heart. And maybe that's exactly what their experience is here for, is just to continue gaining more experience, right?
Yeah, it helps, it's not always, it's easier said than done, but it helps to remind ourselves of these pieces, because then it creates some space around what we expect is supposed to happen versus what is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we assume we know what's best for people, right? And there's this part in us that feels like we need to save everyone. But the truth is, like, people have to save themselves. They have to. The lesson is in the journey. It's not your job. I know countless times where I, again, another analogy, but led the horse to water. You cannot force them to drink, right? Just like if you know someone who's struggling with addiction, they will not change until they're ready to change. And so we have to also remember that that's actually not our job. It's not our job.
Yeah, and to extend that a little bit, because I love you brought that piece up, it's not our job to save them. And you might not want to hear this, but it might not even be their job in this lifetime to save themselves.
Yeah. I just want to really repeat to those listening. I mean, I don't think if you're listening to our podcast, you probably have some sort of spiritual connection. But if you don't, and you're like, what are these two talking about? This also can apply to just personal development. There's no way anyone listening hasn't experienced this conflict or this tension with someone that they love, someone that they know. And they're like, come on this journey. Like, why are you living your life that way? Whatever. And how tiring, how exhausting, how draining that feels. So when Christina just said, and I want to repeat it, there is so much that you give yourself when you learn to detach from other people's journeys. So much. But in terms of, let's get into this a little bit, like, why is this so hard for us? Because it's definitely been, I think, a hard piece in Christina's journey and mine. One, I think we have to go back to science history when we think of how we used to live in sort of a tribe, in a collective. Everyone's together. You do not want to be the black sheep. So from a basic survival perspective, It's innate in us to want to go with the flow. We want everyone to walk in the same direction. There's power in numbers, especially when you think back to those days where maybe we lived in a forest and there were predators and all these other things around us. But we've adapted. We've evolved.
Have we?
In some aspects. Maybe we need to re-adopt some of those old practices. One of them being not wireless earphones, because that was one of the issues for our audio last podcast. So that's why we're back to having these cords. Paleolithic times over here. But now individuality, power of choice, that is so much of the world that we live in. And yet I don't know if it's fully accepted. So you feel this urge in your soul maybe to begin your own journey or whatever it is. But it's so hard because you have to break away from the tribe, from the collective. Also, in that same vein, when we think about why it's hard for us to accept other people going on their own path, which maybe looks very different than ours, there's actually a lot of projection there. So I want to pause in case that's triggering you. I think so many things are a mirror. So if you feel like you're exhausting yourself, you're judging someone else for the way that they're living their lives, right? That's maybe different than your own. There's also an element of projection at play here. Let's break this down for a second, which is if I'm over here by myself living this life and you're refusing to jump on board, right? That means I'm alone. And that makes me uncomfortable. And my ego wants to fight I think I'm telling myself it's because I'm saving you. This is the better way to live over here. In actuality, it's a lot like people pleasing. There's a lot of safety I'm looking for by you validating I'm living my life the way I'm choosing my journey, right? And so just go a little bit below the surface there.
A little louder for the people at the back.
When I sat with this topic, I was really thinking of myself on the beginning of my journey and kind of being, just like a sheep, like following, and then had this huge life awakening and all these things changed. And I remember wanting to shout it from the rooftops and thinking, of course, everyone's going to change too. And when that did not happen, I just remember being just in shock. Like, what do you mean? And when I dig a little bit deeper, there was a piece of my ego there that needed that collective presence on that journey. Like I really desperately wanted it because it was so far from the life I had lived. And I think there's a part of us, like if you're feeling that way about someone, there's probably a part of your own journey that you haven't accepted yet, that you're looking for that external validation, typically between our partners, our family members, our really close friends, right? Those are the people we most want to be walking on that new path with. And it's really, really conflicting when you can feel yourselves just going, not separate ways necessarily, but just different values, different habits, different hobbies, all of the things, right?
Yeah. And it's so interesting hearing your take on this because again, this is where attachment styles come up because, and it does connect in this way to why it's hard. But when I look at, for me, why it's hard in finding this acceptance, for me, it's around control. And I will do something, I will say the thing, I will grow, I will project, but I want you to come with me because I want to feel in control. And I mean, I've really come to learn more about this piece and heal a lot through it. But for me at the beginning of my journey, it was like, why aren't you doing this? Like I'm doing this. Why aren't you? And I couldn't understand why. And it would come from this place of control. And I'm learning this and I've gotten a lot better at it. If you didn't want to do it my way, I'd cut you out. And so this is kind of the opposite side of it is, whether you're trying to do it to maintain connection, I think we always are. And then when you don't get it, you might waffle or you might people please to try to stay connected. For me, on my journey, it's been, if you don't want to come with me on this journey, you're cut. And I've really had to work on healing the part of me that does that out of protection and maintain some connection without it having to always be my way.
Right. And so for anyone listening, that relates to Christina's approach, which is she felt she needed control. I have a question. What was having control? What need was that meeting for you?
And when you ask that, are you saying like when I could control other people's journeys, if I could control other people's journeys? There'd be less uncertainty. Maybe things would feel quote unquote more predictable. I could feel safer. I could know what to expect more. I would be hurt less.
But isn't it funny? Everything comes back to childhood.
Oh my God.
So we can see why this is so hard, because there's so much at play here. Our childhood experiences, our attachment styles, whatever our journey is and our soul purpose, right? What are the lessons that we're meant to learn? If you're meant, I just actually did a little bit on this, but if you're meant to grow tall or big, expand high, you got to dig really deep. There's a lot of things for you to learn here. If you're on a journey like that, you could probably think about it, right? You know, probably people that are on that journey. You're like, wow, all of that's happened to you and you're only 40 years old. It just seems like some people have lived a lifetime already in a few decades. Those are the people, you know, you can already tell. And not everyone is meant for that. It's interesting. I remember working in corporate, a lot of the times I had this one manager who was always trying to give leadership courses and training to every staff person. Like, everyone's going to manage people one day. Everyone needs to, you know, be a boss. And I remember having this epiphany. Not everyone is meant for that. Everyone wants that. And it's the same way, right? When we think about exactly what you're talking about here, like, we're all meant for different things. And when you can have that perspective on things, there's just so much more accepting and it becomes less hard.
And I love that you brought the piece up of, in order to expand, like, essentially we must descend into ourselves, being able to know our patterns, our attachment stuff. It's all connected, right? And so as you guys can see in Tess and I kind of talking about these different pieces and dissecting them a bit, and that actually wasn't even part of it, to go through a little dissecting of Christina's pattern. You know, if you resonate with Tess in terms of it feels scary to expand and release because you're scared of losing that connection, the invitation here is actually to continue to expand and trust. And if you resonate with mine, where it's like expanding, it's actually easier to cut out of like a protective mechanism. The invitation here is to continue to expand, but stay connected in some way if you can. Ooh.
And we'll touch on that piece too. Radical acceptance is this view of accepting people right where they're at with any need to change them. And that's a process and a muscle that's built. What are the great qualities of that person that you love, even if you're on different pages about certain things, right? Can you lean into those pieces? Maybe dynamics between people and their parents, you know, family members. Everyone's meant to play a different role in our lives as well as on their own journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can discuss that a little bit more when we get to the end piece around, you know, how to be able to practice this acceptance more in your life, because the answer is not to not grow and people please, and the answer is not to grow and cut out. It's like that sticky middle place.
Yeah, though that does sound quite easier.
We have to learn from each other a little bit with this one, as always. Hi, my friends. We're going to pause here for a moment and just let you know, if you're needing deeper support on the journey, some of the ways that you can work with us.
Hey, thanks for listening. It's Tess here. I know life's challenges can feel overwhelming, but through breathwork, there is a way to find clarity, release those stored emotions, and feel more at peace. I offer one-to-one, group, and online sessions, and I'm excited to share my upcoming digital breathwork audios, perfect for when you need support on the go or in your own time. So if this speaks to you, visit my website, tessrouse.com, or connect with me on socials at @herunearth. Let's breathe through it together.
Hi, my friends. Christina here. If you're needing deeper support on your journey, there's lots of different ways that we can work together. I offer one-to-one soul coaching, as well as one-to-one readings, Akashic Record soul readings, and intuitive guidance sessions with Spirit. Everything I do has such a deeper purpose. It's meant to help bring you home to your power within and show you that you can make it through anything that you're going through in your life. So if you want to reach out and contact me, you can find me on my socials at christina.soulempowered, or you can check out my YouTube channel where I provide different teachings and channeled guidance. Same handle at christina.soulempowered, or you can email me, christina@rootsoflovecoaching.ca.
And now, back to the episode.
Okay. Okay, so let's dive into some personal experiences in relationship. And I can start off with this piece. I'm going to talk about two really important relationships in my life where over the course of my journey, especially over the last, 7-ish years, I've really had to understand these relationships on a deeper level, trust more in the unfolding. And it's interesting to see where I've come with both of them internally as well as externally, how they look. Mm-hmm. So the first piece would be with my children's father, Brad. And I want to talk a little bit around, not so much when we were together and then separating, but more so the co-parenting dynamic now. And I know that this is going to resonate for some of you listening because, man, co-parenting is a spiritual lesson in itself.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh my goodness. And there is truly an invitation of releasing control because it's so different being in a relationship with someone and parenting children versus being in a relationship with someone as co-parents, but not together parenting children. And Tess, you and I chatted, well, we always chat, but something that showed up last weekend was a situation where Brad and I were not agreeing on something together. And you know what, for the most part, I feel like we've come a long ways, and I've always had a vision of how I wanted to see this co-parenting dynamic. And, I will shout out to my parents because despite how toxic and crazy the separation was with my parents, one of the things they did really well was always be respectful towards each other and have a healthy co-parenting dynamic in how we viewed their relationship together. And that's, I think, a vision I've always been able to have for Brad and I. It doesn't mean that it's been easy.
Yeah. I think we'll do a whole episode on parenting and co-parenting.
Oh, man. The gift that keeps giving. But last weekend, we had a piece that we weren't agreeing with. And it was a really triggering piece for me. It was really triggering. And I really had to sit with a lot of my tools and practices. And I would talk to Derek a little bit about it. And he was really able to help me back away and just create space from what was the situation and what was my deep trigger being activated. So that was really helpful. But essentially, I was reminded of this piece that I can't control Brad. I can't control anyone. I can't control my children. I can't control Derek. I can't, And when I say that I want to control, that's a wounded part of me. That's a young part of me. So if you're hearing this and you're like this is a young part of you. If you seek control and you're, quote unquote a control freak, this is a young wounded part of you that's looking for safety. But what I came to was that, again, I can't control him. And he's going to do things that I might not agree with. And I really had to back away and look at the facts. He's a good father. He creates safety for the kids. And it's funny, I almost felt a little bit of emotion coming up there. And that at the root of this, one of the truths that was coming up was this deep wound that I still needed to work with and will have to work with moving forward. And that he was, in a sense, hearing me. He might not have been doing exactly what I wanted him to do. And I think that was a part of me, really latching on.
I remember.
But he was hearing me
to
some sense. And I really began to realize through the process that, I can advocate for my children. I can say all the things. And then I have to release some of that and remind myself that they also have a journey with their father. Mm-hmm. And it may not be exactly how I want that journey to go. Hello, ego. But it's the truth. And they have certain lessons that they're going to learn with him, just like they have certain lessons they're learning with me.
I love this part, though, that you, despite how triggered you were in that example, that you were able at the end to actually come to sort of this radical acceptance piece, but then also really point out what he was doing so well, what the positives were. We're so wired to see the negative in people, the negative undertone of their action or their inaction or their understanding or misunderstanding, that we miss some of the beauty in it, right? And that is our ego, our emotion, our wounded parts kind of taking over and blinding us to that. So that's great that you were able to pause. This shows how you're using the tools, reflect, mirror. What am I responsible for in this scenario, so that you could actually begin to kind of through the fog see like, oh, he did hear me. He made an effort. What are the things he is really good at? He's a great dad, right? And we need to take that same lens into a lot of our relationships. And that's, I think, where that accepting of someone else's journey comes from, because they're not going to hit all the marks for you. But no relationship really is, right? Like, we need to realize people play different roles in our lives too. And obviously, your soul contract with him was to create these beautiful, amazing kids. And,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and, to add to that, the importance of making sure you're tending to your own triggers, because that's also part of my soul contract with Brad, is the deeper stuff with my parents and specifically my dad. Right. And so this is where we also, like, part of the radical acceptance that I have found, quote unquote, some control in, is then going within myself to figure out what I need. And that can really help in, I don't think releasing is a passive action. I think when we release something, there is something being asked of us to go within, and we find some control in that. So that was the first sort of experience I wanted to share. The next one is with my sister. Oh, did it just cut out there? Oh, okay. So the next relationship that I want to share is my relationship with my older sister, Danielle. Shout out, Danielle. I hope you're listening to this. We have had a wild ride. And our lives, we've been through so much together. Lots of ups and downs. We fought like crazy when we were younger. In our 20s, we were like best friends. And then we became moms. And I went on my journey. And that started to really shift things for us. And it created a lot of distance. And there was a space of time, a couple years at least, where we were on very different paths. And I think that was scary for both of us, because we had always been quite close. But as I was going through my own awakening, I was really beginning to look at some of these different things, and she wasn't on the same journey. And that created a lot of contrast, a lot of sticky energy, because, there were things that she was doing in her life that I wasn't agreeing with. And maybe there were things that I was doing in my life that she couldn't really see eye to eye on. And it was really hard. It created a lot of more charged energy in our interactions. And it got to this place where and I talked to you a lot about this, Tess. It was so hard because my sister has always been one of my best friends, but I had to really come to this place and accept that we just were not in the same space. And that was just the truth of it, and let go of some of this. But here's the interesting thing, because this is where that attachment thing comes in for me, but it wasn't about cutting out the relationship. It was about letting go of the things I couldn't control and maintain some form of connection in a healthy way. Bits and pieces. Create boundaries around the things that didn't align, but stay connected in the things that did.
Yeah, I love that.
And I can say now, our relationship is in such a different space. And I think that there were two things that allowed for this. One, it was her beginning to get on her own journey and opening up to certain pieces, but me releasing control of her journey. And not projecting all this stuff of you need to do this, you need, no, that was not helping me at all. That was not helping us.
Well, isn't that the way life always works, right? The moment we can detach from the outcome of something, that's typically when whatever needs to happen usually comes in, right? It sounds like you met this moment where you realized control, being resentful, angry towards her wasn't working, and you began to just kind of pull away a bit and just accept it for what it was. And I just want to hit on this point too, acceptance of something doesn't mean agreement, right? And so there's a radical difference there. And it sounds like you sort of hit that. It's almost like you were having this controversy within yourself, well, if we don't agree on all these things, we can't have relationship. Whereas you just actually accepted okay, those are the choices she's making. These are the ones I'm making, and I still love her. And here's the reasons why. And then all of a sudden the relationship sort of began to transform into, what now I think most people would think is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Right? With all the work that you two are doing.
Yeah. And it reminds me of something that you've said before many times, which is actually when we can let go of the way it's been, it can create space for something new to be able to come in, or something new to be able to grow.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's such a key piece, because often for these relationships to be able to grow and expand, there is going to be a new energy to them. But if we're holding on to the old energy, that new energy can't come through.
Yeah, and that may look like, you and Danielle sounds like you maintained relationship throughout, but for a lot of people listening, it can actually look, and we've talked about this in other episodes, but it can look like a convergence and a divergence in your relationship. So maybe that means, oh, we're going on different paths, we're moving away from each other in whatever phase of life we're in, but then maybe something happens on one of our own timelines and one of our own journeys, and it actually pulls us back together, or we find mutual things that we're kind of magnetized back into each other's, lives with. And so there's a contract piece about that too. But I think we hold on so tight, especially to like friendship type relationships and family, because it just feels like there's no breakup process for that. It's not like intimate, partnership. And so we think we have to like maintain status quo. And you're right. Then there's this holding of this old relationship. Whereas if we can just allow what wants to pull away, and then naturally maybe it comes back together, and just allowing that process, which is really an acceptance of each of your journeys, your own included, not trying to force something. And I think you're right. There's so much freedom in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we'll flip the script then.
Let's hear it, girl. I don't even know what you have planned. I'm excited to hear some of yours.
I don't even know what I have planned. Here we go. The personal stories ones I just leave to what feels right in the moment. But
love that.
For myself and for those listening who resonate a lot with maybe my attachment styles or similar childhood experiences, I've always accepted other people's journeys. I've never necessarily felt judgmental towards people. More, it's been about my own journey. I'll explain that in just a second. But, when I did begin sort of this awakening through a number of rock bottoms and really began to change my life away from the checklist of what society said was building a life for success, there was just a lot of rejection from, I would say, family members or, some close friends for sure. And there was this, I felt very judged. I felt very sort of at this precipice of, if I continue down this road of like pulling away from the group, what will that leave me with? I will be alone. So, whenever you're feeling either unaccepting of someone's journey or of your own, there's something there that's being asked to be looked at. And for me, it was really creating strength around my beliefs, what I wanted for myself, and really not needing external validation for that, which is what I would say I did, where I would pair my journey with everyone else. Like, we all need to be on the same boat together, right? Or at least I needed to feel that they fully accept and understood and were in full agreement with the choices I was making. And when I didn't receive that, it was another rock bottom all over again. I think also because we're all geared a bit differently. I'm sure those listening can tell that just in mine and Christina's personalities. It's really hard for me when people are super malicious. And I know it comes from a place of ego and trauma and all of that. But 5 years ago, when I was on the beginning of my journey, it felt really personal. It felt really scary. And so for me, it was more about finding that empowerment within myself to go alone, even if that meant losing everything, even if that meant all the grief that would be in front of me, all of the people that I would no longer be walking beside or have a relationship with. And so for me, like, that's been the hardest part of accepting the journey, is that sometimes you have to accept your own, like when you get those nudges and those whispers, and when you don't get the crowd behind you, that's okay too. And of course, I would come into this world with this vision of like, oh yeah, you do you, like, oh, go team, I'll be there. You're going to, I don't know, go do a TED talk, I'll cheer you on. You're going to go on a cooking show, I'm going to cheer you on, like whatever it is. So I think it was just very interesting, of course, that then when I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do this, it was crickets, from certain people I expected to be there.
So what would you say to the person listening that maybe is feeling that rejection or judgment or is scared too?
That it's a call to a part inside of you that needs to feel safe, and that you need to reassure and work through whatever wound that is so that you can continue on. It's a call to show you, hey, in this container, maybe it's like a partner or a sister or something that you're feeling that rejection from. If you can't handle that, and then you want to go to the outside world, think of someone who maybe is going to have a big presence on social media. There's going to be trolls and people commenting on your thing. If you can't handle that one dynamic, How are you going to go out into the world? I think it's a call to build that muscle, to feel that empowerment and to create it within yourself before you keep going. You know what I mean? It's almost like, hey, before you keep moving up the chain and up the levels that you want in your life, you're going to have to master this one first. Right. And so that's that whole piece around relationships are this petri dish for our growth. They mirror to us so many of the pieces that we need to work through before we go to the next place we want to go in life.
Yeah. And I got this visual of when you were saying that, when we will have built a house within ourselves of glass, and it's very easy if you get hit by one little rock for that to shatter.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And for me on my journey, as I was beginning, like I was unsure. I was unsure in myself. I didn't know. I already felt judged by everyone. So of course, like the world would like mirror that right back to me. I mean, you know, we both, you included, you had to sit in it with me. It was probably one of the most challenging journeys of my life, to be frank. So very different experiences for us, but all, I think, radical acceptance of my own journey and the fact that other people were going to stay on theirs, even if that meant they were going to judge me for mine. And then also, like, you know, for you, like this acceptance of like, I can't control it and I have to detach from that and find safety within myself and all of those other pieces.
Y'all, it's about going inside. Always about going inside and giving yourself what you need. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Let's jump into it. Let's keep going. I mean, we've sprinkled a lot of different tools and things for people. Maybe before we jump into the tools, maybe for those listening, like, you know, wherever you are, as long as, again, you're not driving, like close your eyes for a second and actually just think, who right now in my life, in what relationship am I trying to change? Who am I judging for their journey, their choices? Maybe it's a partner, a friend, a boss, a coworker. Like really think of that relationship dynamic. And then ask yourself, what is that showing me about me? Go in. What is the need maybe that's not being met for you? What's the fear that you have? Are you projecting something onto that person? Is there a part within yourself that you haven't accepted yet, and therefore you're not accepting within them? Is there something that you're envious of on their own journey, so you're judging it? Because again, we are the only ones we can control, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about some tools while you're thinking of that example.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'd love to start with is this piece around, so if you are in a place where, I'm sure you are if you're listening to this, if you're in a place where you're trying to find more acceptance around those relationships, an analogy that I have kind of began to practice in my own life that helps remind me, it helps me kind of detach from that energy and just create some space, is thinking about how that person might actually be speaking a completely different language than you. Because when we go on this journey of awakening or digging in, growing, healing, whatever that looks like, expansion, and somebody in your life is not on a similar journey, I really like to visually imagine it's kind of like somebody being landed on the ground and then you get in an airplane and you fly up into the air. And this isn't about being superior. It's actually just about different vantage points. It's about seeing things from different places. It's about being in different perspectives or speaking different languages. And just like we wouldn't get mad at somebody when we're trying to communicate with them and they speak a different language and they don't understand us, we wouldn't get mad at them. We would probably actually try to figure out a different way to communicate. Or we would accept, this isn't working, I can't communicate with you, right? But no, when we're in these situations, we try to force and push and, you know, and so if you can remind yourself that you're at very different places in awareness, and what do you need to do to try to maybe shift the communication or just accept that you're not able to communicate at this point?
I love that. Yeah, it's a great way. Another perspective that I try to think about when I'm in these tough moments, because they still come, by the way, everyone, is around that soul contracts piece. And whether you believe that or not, it helps me a lot when I'm feeling so hurt or misunderstood by someone that I feel should be there for me and they can't because maybe they can't see it from my perspective, or we're just on different wavelengths, that maybe there's a reason. Maybe we agreed to this before we came to this school of earth. That they said, I'm going to be a mirror for you and I'm going to do this to you. And we agreed to that. I'm also not saying that when conflict comes or someone crosses your boundaries, that you just say, oh, well, I guess I agreed to that. No worries. You obviously still have to take action. You have to protect your energy, create boundaries, hold people accountable. I'm not saying you don't do that. But it also really helps with empathy and forgiveness. If you can think for a second about when someone has hurt you, like, what if we agreed to that? Because I guarantee when you think about those experiences, there was probably a lesson that you learned sometime after, right? Hindsight 2020. There's always something we gleaned. We're like, yeah, you know what? If I could go back, I probably wouldn't. Like, I really needed that lesson or that wake up call or whatever it was. So that idea of these contracts, these agreements that we have really helped me to not hold the resentment or the anger.
Yeah, I love that you brought up that piece again. It's really helped me a lot with the kids, with their journeys, not just being their mother and recognizing that I'm going to do things that I'm not always proud of. And I'm not saying, oh, you deserve this or it's part of the contract, but it does help me forgive myself sometimes when I know that it's part of their journey, but also part of mine, because if I'm sitting and looking at that, I'm growing and healing through the process.
I never thought of it the other way. Okay.
Right?
Mind blown. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So here's another piece that came through the other day that I really was thinking about on a deeper level. And I just love all the analogies and the visuals. So I'm going to try my best to kind of provide that. But when we think we know what's right for somebody else's path, and we're projecting this energy at them, whether we're saying it or we're just like feeling that energy and that's coming across in our interactions. Or, sometimes maybe you're like sending all the things to that person with good intentions, right? But there is an energy of projecting it at them. It's like at them. That actually is not going to do much because it's going to hit them. And if they're not in a place to receive that, it's going to bounce right back at you in some way, whether it's in how they're speaking to you in return, or it's not landing and it's just coming right back at you. So what if you could actually, two things that can be really helpful in that, because we still want to be able to maybe say the thing, right? We still want to be able to maybe bring up the idea, but can you imagine actually allowing that piece to land between you rather than on them? Notice the difference in the energy there. It's not as projected, it's more settling in a space between you.
And would you do that just with like how you said it?
Yeah. How, maybe the amount of times you're saying something, maybe
the tone,
how you're bringing it up, because there's a difference in when we bring something up in a heated, activated way versus when we bring something up in a neutral energy. Right? Like I think about the kids when we're trying to really help them understand something. We can't do that in the heat of the moment. They're not receiving anything. So you wait until they're regulated. You wait until they're in a place where they're open to receive it, not feeling attacked.
I love that. It reminds me, I talk a lot about couples who, are going through a hard time and they're like, oh, let's go to couples counseling. And I'm always like, ooh, have they done like any of their own work? Have they looked at their own shit? Because how's that going to go? You're sitting across someone on a couch telling them all the ways they're inadequate, all the things they've done. And they are not ready to receive that if they have not already themselves acknowledged it. So I love that thread through, because you're right. They have to be ready to receive. And that may not come in the timeline that you would like. So I love that idea of just leaving it in the middle. And when they're ready, maybe they'll grab it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's about also just modeling your own healing.
Ooh,
right?
Be the lighthouse. Be the lighthouse, girl.
Well, that's really all we can do, and I see this a lot actually with clients, people I work with, also in my own life. Like, you actually don't realize who's listening, who's watching, who's paying attention, who's feeling your energy. We don't always realize that. And often it's going to be the people you might not expect that are like, oh, whoa, I'm seeing you do this, or I saw you said this in passing, and that's what it means to model your own healing, expansion, growth in your own life. That's the best we can do sometimes.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a much more neutral energy than shoving it down someone's throat.
And I heard this analogy too. I think I just want to, for anyone who's feeling this controversy on your journey, especially with, like longtime friends or family members, the people who you think you're going to be on the same path with forever, right? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, my coworker and I were very different, blah blah blah, but you're like, no, that's like my mom and me, or that's my bestie from grade 3 and me. It's that those are the people that are actually going to have the hardest time with your change, because they love who you were. They already love that. And so it doesn't mean that they don't love the new you, but maybe they have to build a new relationship, and they also have to change their perspective on some things and see you. And that sometimes takes time. Oh. And so that acceptance of even our own journey for the people that, we love or have relationship with, sometimes that, like the relationship 2.0, marriage 2.0, like those take a while sometimes, right? So I think it's always like being okay with that detachment piece we talked about earlier, about that convergence and divergence. Like maybe they'll come back into your life with a new perspective and say, I'm sorry that I judged you or I projected on you, and vice versa. Sometimes we need to own up to that as well.
Well, and these people in our lives, the closest ones, or the ones that we've known the longest, that have known us and who we are in our human form, our identity. Mm-hmm. It's like a tower of Jenga. When we start to do this work, we pull the pieces out.
Yeah, you literally topple the whole person. You kill them off.
Right, but then the other person who's playing that Jenga with us, that's why it starts to get scary. Is like, oh my gosh, the foundation is falling apart. The identities are collapsing. Who is this person, but also who am I in relation to this person?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I love a good change, how it has a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
It's a big mirror, for sure.
And so that can be extremely scary, because when we start to collapse identities of who we are, who we've always been, that then creates a mirror for the other person. And some people are really not ready for that.
And may never be. Accept. Radical acceptance.
And that's okay. That's okay, as I'm telling myself this. That's okay.
I just really want to drive home that piece, because I don't know if it's society or what it is, but we come into this world with these, especially these core relationships that we start in the beginning of our lives. And I know there's people out here listening that are probably estranged from some of their parents or things like that, because there was so much conflict in going on your own journey, setting your own path, and someone trying to control that and saying, no, get back over here. Because the moment you begin to change the Jenga structure, then sometimes they have to look at that. And that's really uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Really uncomfortable. So yes, if there is, like you and your sister, there's still this piece that's pulling you together. You can work out these pieces. No one's boundaries are being crossed. People aren't being mistreated. Absolutely. You're going to want to can you change your perspective? Can you see the positives of this relationship? Like, where are the places you can connect? But there's also going to be relationships where you are on completely different journeys, and maybe they're causing more harm than good. And it's okay, no matter if there's blood relation, history of years and time relation, to just step away from that. It doesn't mean that it's never going to come back, that there's not going to be this convergence, but you also have every right to protect your own journey and your own space.
Yeah, I think if there's safety concerns, you got to get out.
And that doesn't just mean physical, everyone. That's like emotional, energetic.
Yeah. And, reevaluating. Like taking some time to reevaluate. So let's say the Jenga structure falls, and sometimes, frankly, people don't want to clean it up, right? But reevaluate how you want to build that structure again. That's part of the 2.0 that you get to create, and making sure that person wants to be part of that.
I would leave listeners with like one last question to ask themselves, which is, if you're wondering, like, is this relationship worth reevaluating, rebuilding, like, creating new perspective around, how does that person make you feel? Really tapping into how you feel in your body. And maybe that just means the dynamic of the relationship needs to change, or maybe that means that you do need to walk away, right? because so often we stay in these containers where it's draining, it's toxic because we feel we have to, even though our soul is pulling us way over here and that person's going way over there, and we're trying. We just keep trying to make it fit, but we're not building together, and things are not forming or taking shape. There's no shame in that.
Yeah. And to add to that, are they also open to growing? Are they open to maybe building something new?
Where you're both having to change perspectives.
Yeah, the reciprocity.
Yeah, such a key piece.
Yay.
Love that.
Friends, so glad you guys could join us. We hope that you have the best day. As always, Tess and I are here if you need support in any way. And if you are liking the podcast, please let us know. We always really value and appreciate if you leave a review. It allows the podcast to get to other listeners. We also really value and appreciate if you share it with others.
Yes. Thank you to everyone who has already.
Yes.
And in the coming weeks, we'll be having some solo episodes. So make sure you subscribe to tune in and don't miss those.
Yay. Have the best day, my friends.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.